Hey, look, somebody asked me a question. I better answer it. Hey, it's Aaron from AaronOnAutos.com, and today I have 3 questions out of almost a dozen. I had a whole bunch of questions just in the last few days. The ones that came out last week, a couple of those are follow-ups to that. So the question that I have for right now is, where do I get these cars? How do I, Aaron Turpin, famous automotive journalist, where do I get the cars that I drive? How do I get them? The short answer to that is the manufacturers bring them to me. So different manufacturers, you can name them. I drive pretty much everything. There are only a handful of manufacturers I don't get vehicles from, and they are mostly top end. So I get pretty much everything to drive. They bring me those vehicles to drive, and I drive them, and then I write about them. Now, that brings up questions of, well, who pays you? Am I getting paid by the car maker, or am I getting paid somewhere else? And the answer to that is also, I get paid somewhere else. The manufacturers do not pay me. They bring me the car. They do not charge me for that. They bring it to me because they want the publicity. They want the exposure. And then the type of exposure they get is pretty much up to me. I am honest about what I think about the vehicle. I talk about the vehicle in frank terms. I don't tend to gloss things over, but we happen to live in a market which is good. We happen to live in an era in an automotive market where almost everything being built is great. There are exceptions, and it's not great for everybody. So each car, each vehicle has its own buyer. It has its own persona. So it has a segment of people that are going to want it. Part of my job is to embed myself into that and think about, if I were the person to buy this car, what kind of person is that? What would they expect to see? What do they expect to have? And then also add on the overall norms that we have in the industry. We expect certain things out of vehicles no matter what they are. Certain levels of comfort, certain levels of capability, certain levels of drivability, and so on. So that, in the short version, that is what I do, and that's where the cars come from. Now, the longer version is that the cars, it's a little more complicated than that. They're not just giving them to me because I said, hey, I want to start reviewing cars. And they were like, oh, cool, here, have a Mercedes. It doesn't work. That doesn't work. It's not exactly how it works. So starting out, every automotive journalist I've met has a different story. Some of them went to school, they got their journalism degrees, and they went into automotive, and they took a traditional route. They had an internship somewhere, they cut their chops, and they got themselves where they are now. For the most part, the freelancers that I know did not do that. They did not go that route. The freelancers like myself, we started probably doing something completely different and ended up here. For me personally, it was computer science. It was automotive mechanics, truck driving. I was doing all those. I was doing those things first before I did this. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, I went to an automotive show, the Denver show. So the Denver car show down in, that happens every spring in Denver. And I got a media pass. I got accepted as media to go in. And there I met a whole bunch of people, and I found out that this is like a job. Like, you can do this for a job. And then I found out that you can get cars to drive. And that opened up a whole new alley for me. And I looked, for me, it was an epiphany, because I was like, now I have a goal with this. Up to that point, I was just writing whenever somebody asked me. I was writing on a whole lot of subjects, and cars were just kind of one of them. They were kind of on the side. They were a tiny bit of it. And so to answer the question as to how you get them, you have to get into the business. And to get into the business, you have to figure out what you can do in this business. Writing about automotive is not as easy as it sounds. There are a lot of people who do stuff that I will have nothing to do with because I have zero interest in it. The most people who start out in this business probably end up in what I would consider a junior level spot. So they're working for one or more outlets, and they're generally doing like news items, quick news pieces based on PR releases, things like that. From there, you can build yourself up. For me personally, it started out as I was writing about electric scooters, actually. A friend of mine, at the time I didn't know him, but a friend of mine now, he came to me and asked if I wanted to write about electric scooters. I was writing about video games and things at the time, for the most part. And I said, sure. And I started writing about them. And then that turned into a gig writing about electric cars. And then that turned into a thing writing about advanced or future, I guess you would say. It was actually the place I was writing was called Future Cars. It's no longer around, but it was owned by a company that was, they owned several things. They also had health sites and a lot of other things. And I wrote for all of that, not just about cars. And then I also started writing do-it-yourself mechanics stuff. And I just kind of kept progressing, and I got a job at a place called Torque News, where they asked me if I wanted to write, and pretty soon I was covering Nissan and Infiniti, and then a few miscellaneous things as they came up, all automotive. That was one of my first big breaks getting in, because that's a fairly large site, still around, still a great place. It doesn't fit me anymore. I left a couple of years ago, but it's a great place, and I know a lot of people that are there that I really like and have respect for. So that turned into another one. I started writing for Guys Gab. I still write there. So Sujit owns that, and that was big enough to start getting me cars, and then it just kind of kept going. I kept finding new places, adding more outlets. And when you get big enough, you get to be what's called an A-lister. So you're somebody who is high up the food chain in terms of your reach, your out, you know, how many people read what you have to say. And then automotive companies will respond to that by giving you more vehicles. So kind of the long and the short of it is you have to have enough reach. So you have to be at the point where you reach a large enough audience, whether it be, most of the time it's from one outlet. So they use one as your metric, and then everything else kind of below that in a bonus. But more and more manufacturers are realizing that that you can combine those things. And that's opened it up for freelancers like me a lot, because I have one outlet that's huge, but I also have 4 or 5 outlets that are also pretty big. And if you only count the one, I'm not getting the kind of credit I should. If you count 3 together, say, then it's huge. And so, you know, I know that in terms of the number of people potentially reading what I have, I am on a level that is very, very up. It's very high. And that's good. That means I get more vehicles. So the way that the logistics work is I've mentioned this before, the automakers hire contract with fleet management companies. The fleet management companies, in this area there are 3. In other markets there are 2, sometimes 1, sometimes 4 or 5. Just depends on the market and the level of competition. We're fairly rare that the Denver area is a smaller market but has 3 vendors. We call the fleet managers vendors. It's kind of a short way of saying it. And each of them handles different manufacturers. So they will come to me and they'll say, this is what we've got, and this is how we want to schedule it. I ask for an advanced schedule. So I like to know what I'm getting in the next month or so. Other journalists, often they just, whatever shows up. They don't know, and they don't know what it is necessarily until the day it shows up or a few days before. I like those guys because then when something cancels on me and I end up with their vehicle, they're none the wiser because I got something else. So, but anyway, it's all dependent on what you're doing. For me, I have to have advance notice because I then need to take it and pitch it to outlets to see who will take it. And if I can't get enough for that vehicle, I will tell the vendor and possibly the PR person for the manufacturer, I'll say, look, I can't do very much with this. If you need to cancel it, I totally understand that. You get a lot of respect doing that in this business, by the way. So, long story short, you have to be a journalist at a level that the manufacturers are willing to give you vehicles. If you are not, you won't get them. Manufacturers are more and more understanding that social media plays a part. They're understanding more and more that YouTube like this plays a part. They're understanding more and more that there's more than just, can you get it into this magazine now? And that's meant that I have met a lot of people who basically don't write a word. They don't write anything. They do like Instagram posts and other stuff. And that's a whole different genre that I'm glad to see. It's cool to see that, because those are people that they're called influencers, and those are people who have influence, and they should get the recognition for that. My issue with a lot of journalists, including social media, but also including print and everywhere else, is some of them, not a lot of them, some of them get very full of themselves, and they get very, what's the right word for it? They get very, very entitled, where they think they deserve, or they should have, or they merit more than they're getting. Those types of people really bother me. But for the most part, most journalists that I've met, they're great people. This is a really cool business because it's such a community in a lot of ways. So when I go to a launch event, chances are I'm Facebook friends or real life friends with a whole bunch of other people that are going to be there. When I go to an auto show or something like that, a lot of that show for me is the connection, saying hi to somebody I haven't seen in maybe 6 months or something, but I talk to all the time because of Facebook and email and stuff. So that's really cool. But I've really kind of rambled here. But the point is that to get the cars, you have to have the outlets. And the manufacturers bring me the cars, the outlets pay me when I write about them. So here on YouTube, I'm getting paid. I get ad revenue for these videos. I also reuse the videos on other outlets occasionally, and then I'm getting paid when I'm writing for like New Atlas, Guys Gab, any of those places that I've talked about. I currently have 7 automotive review outlets and 9 or 10, I think, total that I'm writing for. So it tends to be a juggle, but I have a marker board over here on the wall that just has a lot of stuff like to do this and where I'm writing and who I'm writing, what I'm writing, all of that. So, and then I've become a master of spreadsheets and calendars on my computer. But so there you go. That's kind of the gist of it. It's mostly about reach. So the bigger your reach, the more likely you are to get a car. And then it's handshaking. You get to know the PR people, you get to know the vendors, you get good terms with everybody you can that's part of the business, and you build a reputation. Once you start getting the cars, it's very important. I should have brought that up. Once you start getting the vehicles, then it's all about reputation. You need to produce. You need to put it out there. So if a manufacturer comes to me and they say, here's a car for a week, I want you to drive it. And then I drive that car and I give it back and I don't say word one about it, there's a less chance I'm going to get another one from them. Because for them, there has to be a return. And that return is they're getting the PR, they're getting the public awareness that I'm giving them by talking about their car, even if I don't talk really well of it. So that's it. That's what I got. If you have questions you want to ask, you can ask them in comments down there. You can find me on aarononautos.com. See the new logo? I think it's going to be over there. It might be over there. See the new logo? Whichever place I put it. You can hit me up on Quora. You can hit me up on the Facebook, the Twitter, the whatever. I'm not terribly active on Twitter. It's kind of my weak point. I don't like Twitter. It's kind of a PIA to me. But hey, if you're on Twitter and you like Twitter, you look me up, hit me up with it. Yeah, that's it. So this is number 1. Got 2 more to go.